You're with Julian on the Brown Note. And why has Peter Hartcher, the Sydney Morning Herald, and their alumni got such a bloodlust for China? Peter Hartcher is the political editor and international editor of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Now, when COVID hit, Scott Morrison did one of the most stupid brain farts he has ever done. And I made a video about it, and it's got more views than anything I've ever done by miles. He, at the very start, went into bat for Team Trump and went after China, saying we were going to send in weapons inspectors to find out where the virus came from. Now, all of the European leaders expressed dismay and shock at this incredibly pointless act and incredibly destructive act. And it ended up costing us our largest trade partner, China, who basically cancelled everything, stopped importing goods from Australia, 36 billion a year or something like that. So 36% of our international trade, by far our largest trade partner. And he did it so that he could get on side with Team Trump, who were peddling the same stuff. You would expect any political commentator worth their salt to come out and excoriate Scott Morrison for doing so. Instead, Peter Hartcher was the first over the trenches in his long-running support of Scott Morrison's international faux pas. And even though Scott Morrison was vile, stupid, offensive, dangerous, incompetent, a liar, David Crowe, another of the Sydney Morning Herald alumni, and Peter Hartcher turned into the Scott Morrison fan club. They were continually getting into bat for Scott Morrison. So, towards the end of Scott Morrison's tenure of terror, David Crowe and Peter Hartcher seemed to back off supporting him. Perhaps even they knew that he was the most dangerous thing possible, a second term of Scott Morrison. So they backed off, but they're back now. They're back with a vengeance. This is from today, from the Sydney Morning Herald. This is actually in the Sydney Morning Herald. These are real words from Peter Hartcher, and Matthew Knott is the co-writer. The AUKUS submarines won't arrive in time. Our independent defence panel asks if we should consider national service or hosting nuclear weapons to fight China. We should consider national service or hosting nuclear weapons to fight China is the headline tag. In his latest of quite a few pieces where he's been bumping up the de facto war on China. Just when things are getting better, just when things are calming down, we have no interest in fighting China. To do what? Become America's largest military base and be consigned to that? We've got no skin in this game at all. The only skin we've got in this game is America happily throwing us under a bus by parking nuclear submarines and making us pay $90 billion for them, or doing our bidding, which they did under ScoMo, but now we've got a Labour government in that is far more acutely in tune with not offending China and not chasing the 24-hour news cycle to benefit American interests. And they've done even better by actually getting Scott Morrison in the Sydney Morning Herald too. Billions more in military spending won't be enough to counter China, says Scott Morrison, just a couple of days ago. Former Prime Minister Scott Morrison has urged Australia's military spending should increase by billions a year to counter China. And we should have stronger ties with countries such as the United States. This is the Sydney Morning Herald, which 10-15 years ago was a great newspaper. A newspaper that countered the wall-to-wall Channel 7, 9 and 10, Daily Telegraph, Murdoch Press, Courier Mail support of the Liberals no matter what they did. And ever since they have become the Channel 9 Peter Costello Sydney Morning Herald, they have become a disgrace. You won't read invective so pro-American and anti-Australian interests in the Daily Telegraph itself. Why are they doing this? The only people that benefit from this are American interests. And America is like, we've got a free pass here. We can do what we like. Carry on, Australia. We'll say you're doing great stuff behind the scenes. I'd like to say a message to China, and that is, please don't listen to people like Peter Hartcher in the Sydney Morning Herald. We will think they're batshit crazy. There are no Australian interests being represented here. The only people globally that have a massive problem with China are China's biggest trading partner, America. America want to be able to push China around for economic reasons. They have the largest amount of Chinese goods, $500 billion a year. They're in a dance of death with China. They're both lying, well, America's lying to the world stage that it's even possible for the two countries to fight. But they would happily see Australia be thrown under a bus to do so. And Peter Hartcher and the Sydney Morning Herald are doing this. For what reason? It doesn't benefit anyone in this country. Calling on national service, basing American nuclear weapons in Australia, it doesn't matter if that is laughable. The fact that you vocalise these things one year puts them into some form of mainstream context a year later. Were you not... Did you not lose your boldness in your backing of Scott Morrison and how badly you got it wrong? And now you're fighting China? China's sitting there doing nothing to Australia at the moment. It's been calm waters. Over here, the Sydney Morning Herald starts firing its guns at China. This isn't for us. You don't represent Australia, and shut up.